Take note of that. When you do a white wedding, it's white culture. When you do an African wedding, it's African culture. So are we now saying this culture is superior to this one? That's the first concept when you're talking about this white God. And how does the God of a master and God of the slave remain the same God? And so the shipping away of our history, if we say that the text is African, as a Bible text, then how have we allowed the colonialists to interpret it, removing all the African concepts in it and naming it? John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Mary, Elizabeth, are those African names? Or now they've actually taken the text and adulterated for their own amusement? So, and when we come back to me as a historian and say, how true is this? If the Bible is authentically African, then we must be able to see traces of colonial mischief in the text.
And to use your words, you said that churches are the brothel for the sodomy of African culture. Is this you saying that the Bible as it is, I think just to paraphrase what you're saying, is that the Bible as it is a form of white supremacy?
In its form.
In its form now.
In its use and in its function. The brothel concept of that becomes where prostitution, I'm using the word brothel and prostitution, is commercialized. Commercialized kinds of, those with 5,000 come forward, those with 10,000 come forward, those with 2,000. To see a pastor, you must pay so much. And etc. And churches have just become a venue of collecting money from people. That's where I find the other comment that I put that confused people. How do you buy a factory in an industry? And then you convert that church and people are praying for jobs inside that church. Are you okay? Are you okay in your head? If I were you, I'd rather buy the factory, and when people have the money, then use the money to buy the church. I'm looking at the prioritization of the church, and that's exactly what caused me to friction with my church, why I'm saying the social impact, our social response to the issues, politically and economically, of the community, they've stopped being the priority of the church. Churches are now servicing themselves. And when you say, no, we're doing something for the poor, guess what they're saying? They're only giving food parcels, and etc. I'm not talking about peripheral mindsets where you think that by giving $2 and $3 in a plate of food to the poor, you're doing work. I'm looking at the churches buying farms, factories, impacting their own members. Churches coming together on Sundays and agreeing to put all those money and create banks, create function, so that members can access their own money which they are giving you as loans and etc. I'm looking at genuine impact of the church. Build schools, build hospitals, improve infrastructures. Countries like Nigeria, for example, the churches are collecting more money than the government.
But there are some churches, one may argue that there are some churches that do that. Some that, in fact, are just an entire government into themselves.
True to say that. By saying churches, I hope those that are not doing well will begin to align themselves with the correct agenda. I have come so that they may have life, and have life more abundantly. And if we begin to reduce the quality of life of our members, then what are we doing? How do you tell a church member to sell their house because Jesus wants the house, and you take the house from him? How do you tell a member he does not need the car? You as the pastor need the car. Bless me for what? Are you crippled as a pastor? Go to work. Create your own finances. We cannot use our religious scholars as a way of milking money from the people. I'm saying that is wrong, in all honesty. And if Jesus was the pastor of that church, will he be collecting offerings?
So what's your take? Spirituality. You hardly use the word Christian to describe yourself. You talk about spirituality. You hardly use the word religion. You hardly use the word Christian. In fact, I want you to differentiate this.
You are stuck in something when you talk about Christianity and the whole concept of religion. If the Chinese had colonized you, you would have been a Buddhist in China. If the Muslims had been here, ask Kenya, ask Tanzania, ask Libya, ask Egypt and Algeria, where Muslims are. They're all Muslims. Here we are in the south, we are saying we are Christians. Come on, let's think. Let's just step back a little bit. Are we saying we're Christian because we're Christian? Or those that colonized us are Christians, and they made their God our God? With all due respect, we need to understand that over and above our Christian appetite, there is also a colonial mindset. Right now, if the Chinese are beginning to come into our country, don't you begin to see dragons running around town? And immediately when the Chinese are fully taking over, you don't think by the end of the day you start celebrating Chinese holidays and etc. Where is it going? So our concept of being Christian for me must be for the principles that Christianity stands for, and that is Ubuntu. Do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Those concepts for me are far much more important than the religiosity and the isms of Christianity, where people are just pluraling churches, 37,000 churches later on the face of the earth. One God, one devil, one Bible. And we can't agree on the basic principle of what does this book say.
And what does the book say?
The book. The book says, be fruitful, multiply, have dominion, extend yourself. Here we are on earth. And if any religion does not tell people to take ownership over their own destiny, and if God gave Israelites Jerusalem, what has he given the Africans? So we need to get to the text and claim our own history, claim our destiny, claim our land, claim our identity and pride. You cannot walk up to a church every day being told you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you are evil, you're horrible, you're a sinner. By the end of the sermon, your fathers and grandfathers are demons. Then what are you? This kind of trodden down, pressing down the attitude of the African. I find that pastors are actually having a walk in the park. First thing he opens up his mouth when he's praying, I bind all the ancestral spirit. We're binding them for what? How can you bind the very root through which you come into existence?
And what's interesting was how you merged ancestors with spirituality. I want you to break that down.
Ancestors for me are simple. It's just you in your previous life. Your look, your hair and everything has nothing to do with you. It's how your father, your grandfathers, your uncles and etc. looked like. So yes, our ancestors, they are lying in the grave, but they're buried in our blood, alive and well. That's why when you go to the hospital, they ask you, do you have a history of diabetes? Do you have a history of blood pressure? Do you have a history of cancer? Why are they saying that? So are you telling me that the only thing we can take with us from our ancestors are diseases? What else is in you that was in your father? Not only your complexion, not only your genes, not even the texture of your mind, but the very essence of being. You have been a continuous connection from one ancestor to another. Now how can you divorce yourself from what you are?
So it's not paganism in any way. It's been labeled as pagan as well.
God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Daniel, God of Isaiah, are those people alive? When you become a Christian, do you change your DNA? Which part of it is confusing? And if the Bible in Matthew chapter 1 says Jesus, the son of Abraham, the son of Jesse, the son of Adam, the son of God, why can't I say Joshua, son of Marara, son of Nduma, son of Chapinduka, son of Murenga, son of Zbo? Why can't I say that?
I want us to pivot a little bit and talk about the African in terms of emancipation, economic and spiritual emancipation. Where's the starting point for us as Africans?
I would recommend that economic emancipation is far much more fundamental because politics is a prostitute to economics. Politicians are all for sale.
Break that down.
Yeah, the highest bidder. Economists sponsor politics. Politics buys from economics. Those who run the economy run the politics. Because for you to run a political issue, you need to have the economy. So we need to learn how to build an economy first, then buy the politicians. And after we've bought the politicians can appoint the jurisdiction and legislature. By so doing, we're able to rewrite our own constitutions in line with our own indigenous knowledge systems. We cannot continuously be harassed by the Roman and Dutch laws as if we are Romans and Dutch. If we are Romans and Dutch, then why are we not in Germany? Why are we not in Deutschland? And ultimately, then you can go for propaganda. That's where religion, that's where education, that's where media is. So 4 steps. Do economics right, buy your politicians, then tell your politicians to appoint laws, and from the laws, then manage your propaganda.
And what of democracy? There's a post you put up on Facebook. I think it was had regards with Ukraine and Russia. And I want to get the quote right that you used. And you spoke about how the end game for democracy is the global village and the Africans and with Africans as slaves to the British Empire. I was baffled by that statement.
I mean, a few days ago, the Queen was actually celebrating how many years in power. And here, when an African leader is in power for 5 years, he's a dictator. But the Queen has been there for 70 years, non-stop. And no one complains, because the British royalty is superior to the Bakatla royalty. And are you not noticing this? When you say the British Empire, why must we run away from our own kings, only to end up as subjects of the royal crown of Britain? Now you're Mr. So-and-so, you're Mrs. So-and-so. Are those African titles, or actually admitting that you are a servant of the... So the global village, my question is, when we get to that global village, where the financiers of this world are driving towards the one global funding and one global currency, what will the African be in that global village? Question number 1. Question number 2, who will be the chief in that global village. And ultimately, when our presidents are taking us to this global village, are they fully aware of the ulterior motives? And I think COVID has shown us a few of the backhand of this globalized health care reform that has left African countries in debt. South Africa, for example, in 1 week, 500 billion in debt. How many years will it take you and your people to pay back those debts? Then you understand that behind this has nothing to do with health. People are using health as a sweetener to get African countries and poor countries into debt. Yes, let's be safe. COVID is here. But then how do you sell sickness and death and you manipulate it to benefit only you? If you are really interested in health, give us the IP. What goes into that vaccine, let Botswana produce it for themselves and let's protect and keep lives. No, there's a problem. No, we can't give you the medicine. It's only us who can supply the medicine for you. We're the ones who can heal you. For what?
Your views and your opinions, some have labeled them borderline extremist. I'm sure you've heard that. And I'm saying this to get that as Maponga, excuse me, what would you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy, I must be remembered as that person who just helped the African to stand back on his feet and stop being a basket case. Harvest your indigenous knowledge. Convert them into currency. Harvest your own. Every time you see a truck driving through your cities from your villages and etc., it is shipping away jobs. Because you are constantly, as Africans, being used as suppliers of raw material, not manufacturing issues. I wish our governments can be listening. Go to China, go to Europe, buy those factories that are producing plastic chairs, producing computers and etc. Localize those things. After all, those minerals are right from here. It's amazing up to now, after all this democracy and independence, we're still talking unemployment, yet we have the resources. I want to be remembered as the man who put a stop to the abuse of African resources in the name of trying to become economically right on stock exchanges. Stock exchanges are simply set up to make sure that multinational companies come to your countries and get your resources at less the amount. Why is Britain closing its call centers and looking for cheaper places where they can employ? Why are you afraid of employing your own people? Because capitalists will always want to exploit labor. And why has Africa remained poor? Because we're constant suppliers of raw materials. So hear me very well. We don't need to produce more. We need to manufacture and process more.
But what's the barrier there? Because this is, like you said, it's been years of this. Global leaders talk about that. African leaders talk about that we have resources, we are the source of raw materials. But it seems like there is that disparaging factor between moving from just being a resource economy to actually,
Our politicians are in the pockets of the economists. And when they get into power, they don't get into power to change the system. They get into power to maintain and manage the system on behalf of the funders who paid for them to be in power. Now, you need to unpack that for yourself. So that when you look at your leader, who was once with you in the trenches, immediately is in power, he needs bodyguards to protect him from the same people who put him in power. Now, you can smell a fish and a rat right there. Because when they get into office, then they are told, thank you very much, campaign is over. Here is the law, here is legislation. This is how you function as a president. You can't even change your own educational curriculum and remove William Shakespeare and Michelangelo from your own books. You're still telling your children that Julius Caesar conquered the world. You're never told about your own kings, and etc., who have written. I'm not saying they are not in the books, but they are not the subject matter. They are footnotes in the conversation. And here I am. I met up with one professor from South Africa, Professor Zulu Matabo Zulu. I want to present him to you maybe one day. He has written a Sotho book, mathematics, Sotho book, in local language. Now, that to me is a revolution. Right. And children can learn these things from their own local language. What stops us from taking this knowledge and adapting it to ourselves? What stops us from taking our natural herbs and making them into medicine? No. There's a Minister of Health. And you get there are rules that have been written by white men as long as 1920 to 1923. We've been drinking this mhlonyana and linghana for years. And they say, no, we still want to do tests. You want to do tests for what? When you've been doing this for 1,000 years. Is that not test enough? But no, there are laws. You cannot, it must be processed. It must be what. So our very own system does not have the political will to change the monster of colonization. We now have new colonizers, and they are black just like you and me. They are managing the same system that has traumatized us. This education, We still must go to on leave, on maternity leave for 3 months. Hello? 3 months? Is that not colonialism? Sweden, free countries, they're doing it for 1 year. 1 year for the husband, 1 year for the wife. And here we as Africans, we still think children must go to school at 6 and at 7. Why? Because parents are needed at work. Hello, somebody? Why can't we see how rotten this thing is? And we jump in there and we think that we are progressive. We go back to school and we study only to come back and look for employment. Who needs employment from anybody? Can't we learn what is innovation? After you have studied, can't you go back to your village and transform it?
Unfortunately, it's the time, Mr. Maponga, that has run out. But he's here, and I hear that he has a talk in Avani today, in fact, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just take us through the details real quick. Yes. You can use that one. In 30 seconds, because we're out of time.
Hello, listeners. Thank you very much, Mr. Maponga. We're going to be having career elevation this today and tomorrow.
Yeah, there we go. We're good.
Yeah, we're going to be having career elevation today and tomorrow. That is 15, 16. So Bishop Maponga will be speaking there.
This is a meeting a bishop again. But
Yes.
Mr. Maponga will
he makes me British now.
be speaking at that forum. So
Yeah.
I think everybody who's going to be there is going to get away with something great.
Awesome stuff.
And we've got a line of speakers that are going to help people to get transformed.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure having you guys this morning. I wish we could go into detail with this conversation, but there's always another time.
people can follow me on Farmers of Thought. The conversation
stuff.
continues. Yeah, on Farmers of Thought, Joshua Maponga, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Come on, let's talk about it and let the conversation continue.
Awesome stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for stopping by.
Thank you very much, Bonjo. Thank you very much, Tim.
The views and opinions